All right, let's do this. Hi, everybody. My name is Richard L'Esperance. I go by the name of my man Richard. Welcome to A Better Lifestyle. Today I have Evan Marks with me. He's a mental performance coach. So you guys are going to benefit. I'm sure you guys are going to benefit from that episode. So please, Evan, tell the people a little bit about yourself in about 2 minutes, and we'll get started.
You got it. Well, Richard, I appreciate you having me on your podcast. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm 52 years old. I'm a mental performance coach for the last 6 years, but I didn't start that way, obviously. After graduating university, I went right to Wall Street, where I spent about 23 to 25 years, probably 25 years, managing money on the hedge fund side. It was one hell of a ride, but it was always this. I knew in my heart that I always wanted to be a coach and a teacher. But I think just the track of the university into Wall Street was just one way. And even though I enjoyed my time on Wall Street and it was a good living, there was always this regret of, I want to coach. What happens if one day I never fulfilled this dream? An opportunity came knocking in 2017. I was thinking about selling my fund, my partnership, and this young lady came to me. She's like, what are the odds that you would come work with me? She's a pretty well-known coach. And she actually was my coach at the time. Excuse me, maybe about a year before. And I remember being away. I have an identical twin brother, lives in Sydney, Australia. And we were away on vacation. And I said, Steve, I'm done with this. He's like, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go coach. He goes, how? You go back to school at 46? I said, absolutely. And then opportunity came knocking. I went back to school for psychoanalytical theory, neuroscience. And within 7 months, I'm coaching Jimmy Johnson's pit crew team at Hendrick Motorsports. And from there, it was just love. And I've been doing this now 6 years. And about a month ago, Richard, I started my own coaching company called M1 Performance Group, which was scary in of itself because even though I've been a part of hedge funds, started them, been a partner, this is really the first time I've been on my own. And I was very fortunate that most of my clientele came with me. You know, I've had clients for 5 years, 4 years. It's not these 6 months programs. I'm with people for a long time. And believe it or not, my biggest fear, social media. I'm like, God, I remember I was on a podcast in July and this gentleman then goes, you know, you have zero presence. I said, I understand that. And here I am a month later, maybe a month and a half later, things are cranking. I'm enjoying social media. I can't believe it. I mean, I don't know if this is on the podcast, but it's true. I'm enjoying it. I think you know what it is, Richard. You know, as a trader, we're numbers and it's just this game. But I always know that I knew in my heart, I love connecting with people. And having this opportunity to speak to you, speak to all these incredible people, I could say for the first time in a long time, I feel like my tank is full. And it's such an incredible feeling to have. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunities I have right now. So that's who I am. Yeah.
Well, I had that fear too from social media from when I started the podcast. So everything, everything you see right now, I just overcame that now. So now it's
Yeah.
so now it's better now. So were you always growing up, or even like in your adult life, were you always mentally tough, or you had to develop that as you went along?
You know, it's interesting. I always thought I was mentally tough, but I didn't know what that meant really. And I'll explain why. You know, growing up, you know, you know, I had a very strong mother. My father wasn't around. I had an older brother who was handicapped, and I have an identical twin brother. You know, we worked young, we had jobs young, but we just thought this is what it was, you know, it's just how it was. You know, people worked at 13 years old and played sports and did these things. It was just, we survived that way and we thrived. But when I was in university, I blew my knees out twice. I was a lacrosse player and it shattered me. But I'm like, I'm tough. Push that aside. I can handle anything. And I lived like that for 15 years. But underneath unconsciously, there was this kid who was in massive pain. And I think at that point, you know, when coaching and culture, It was a weakness to express your emotions. So I just put them aside. But I think what we know now is when you start putting this stuff aside, Richard, it starts to build momentum, starts to pick up its own narrative, and it becomes extremely harmful. So when you said, have I always been mentally resilient? I'd have to say, I thought so. Am I more mentally resilient today than I've ever been? 100%, because I have such a better understanding of how the unconscious works, how the brain works, and actually the power when we recognize and acknowledge our emotions, how vital that is, not one, to release trauma, but two, to use those quote unquote negative emotions, negative experiences to your advantage. What I do for a living, Richard, I build solid foundations with people in companies, and we leverage. But you have to understand what you're building, right? You and I have had very different experiences. So I have to understand where your starting point is. And for myself, I had to understand, okay, Ev, where are we starting from here? Where is this pain coming from? And we got to put words to these feelings, and we have to acknowledge them. It's almost like they're stuck in the back of your mind and your unconscious. And you really have to give yourself permission to bring it out so you could see it. And once you're able to see it, the magic happens. And I think now, given all the research out in neuroscience, and I think culture now where mental illness is real, but the strength and the courage to address it is so important. And I think people now, there's this whole holistic wealth movement. We want to get better, right? We want to feel better. We want to be that future self. And we actually have the capabilities now to do it.
So how do you process stuff right now, when life hits you, when life challenges come to you? How do you process stuff mentally?
So I always say to clients, how do we find even ground, right? I don't want to be on my heels. I want to find even ground quick. So I basically, and it's I call it the M1 mental model. Yeah, I don't think I coined it yet. But what it basically is that whatever's coming at you, acknowledge it. It could be frustration, rage, fear. It could be happiness, joy. But if it's something that's triggering you, acknowledge it. It's okay, man, I feel fearful right now. Acknowledge it, verbalize it. That's the key, Richard. Say it out loud, right? That means bring it into the light. Then you give yourself this mental space. Okay, I started this business. I was very overwhelmed. Okay, I'm feeling extremely overwhelmed right now. Okay, pause. Bring yourself down a second. So what do I need to do right now? What's not the right decision. What is the decision I need to make to move forward? Okay, let me do that. And now there's an action right after that. So what you're basically doing is you're slowing down through intentionality, pause, to speed up, which is action. But it's done in a conscious way, right, Richard? Like when you say, oh, I can't believe I reacted like that. I can't believe I was an autopilot. It's not helpful. If we're able to be proactive, and that takes consciousness to actually make decisions. When we say we have to make the right decision, it's only right in hindsight. It's actually making a decision. And then what happens is when we're able to deal with these emotions that are perceived negative, trauma, and I've said this many times, and this is like the part of the foundation building, and we're able to attach a new behavior to it, we start to build a new experience, which in and of itself builds a new operating system for you, which actually serves you better today than it did in the past. It's really fascinating. I do it all. It's my mental model. My number one question every day, Rich, is like, what am I trying to accomplish? What do I need to do right now to move ahead? I must ask myself, what am I trying to accomplish? 15 times a day. It's just my North Star in a way. Because once I ask that question, there's a lot of things underneath it that come into play. It's almost like a positive trigger for me. Just asking that question out loud.
So, what are some techniques that someone could use to to develop mental toughness?
There's all this stuff about doing hard things, right? Doing hard things, hard things. There's truth to it. A lot of my clients in the beginning, people come to me when they're stuck, right? Or when they're plateauing. They're never coming to me when they're just killing it. So it's interesting. One of the first things that I do, and when I work with this lady, she's like, why do you do this? I said, why don't you go take a cold shower? They go, what? Because you got to remember, Richard, when they come to me, they think it's about a leaf on the tree, and it's never about the leaf. It's about something else that they are completely unconscious about. So the basic, what I say is jump in the cold. No, I want to. Well, I know you don't want to. I'm fearful. I know you're fearful. But when you do it, it's almost like, okay, I'm allowed to be fearful, but I actually have the ability to do this. So what that does, that one little thing means that, wait a second, my belief system is changing. I'm actually able to do these things. I don't have to run away. I don't have to do things I used to do in the past. I could actually create new experiences for myself. Now that may sound, we know the data behind cold showers is phenomenal. And that may sound really inconsequential to most, but it's a behavior change. And when we make these small little behaviors, it causes a ripple effect. And even though a ripple effect in the beginning, like they say sometimes that progress can be elusive, it does start to build. And in that, we build this foundation where we can leverage. But it's literally these, and it is cliche, and I know, but cliches are true for a reason. These little steps, if we can be consistent. What am I trying to accomplish here? I need to slow down to speed up. Okay, let me keep going. And then, you know it, Richard. You've had a podcast for 3 years. Did you think you'd be here in 3 years? No. But you started, boop, these little steps, and now you have this phenomenal podcast. There's doubt along the way. There's fear along the way. There's nervousness along the way. But it's really that persistence. And the key is, when you are feeling doubtful and you are feeling nervous, say it. Let it come out. Because if we just think it's going to hold us back, let it out in front and watch what happens. For me, it was a game changer. For my clients, it's a game changer. And then we start filling that capability gap. And it gets exciting.
Do you think positivity has a role to play in that too?
I'm not a positive think guy. I'm not. I'm an opportunistic guy. I think there are some merits to the positive psychology camp. But what I believe is in reality. Richard, things are going to come down the pipe that are going to challenge us, possibly hurt us. I'm not wishing that on people, but I want to know I'm ready for it. So when sometimes okay, here's a positive affirmation. Here's this positivity. Oh, I feel great. But maybe you don't feel great. So what's wrong with that? It doesn't mean you have to be happy right now to succeed. I had this great mentor, and he's probably one of the most well-known psychoanalysts, and he says behavior changes before feelings, which basically means I'm allowed to be nervous, and there's an intensity of it. But when I change my behavior, I may still feel nervous, but my behavior is changing. And the last thing to change is being nervous. Now, you may always be nervous, but the intensity of that nervousness is less, right? Because you're rebuilding your system. When I'm happy, I'll do this. Doesn't work that way. When I'm no longer angry, I'll do this. Doesn't work that way. Once we get to understand that I may be angry for a little bit. Hey, I've been angry. I got angry, rage. I got it all in me, but I use it. Right? My wife says, is it hard being you? I said, it takes a lot of effort. But the whole thing is we use what we have. So when I think affirmations are important, manifesting is extremely important, visualization is extremely important. But if we don't know where we're starting from, it's very difficult to believe these positive affirmations, this positivity, because the confidence comes in, Richard, when I know how to get the stable down quick and I have confidence in my behavior. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
I mean, that when you ask that, that's resilience, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Anything comes down the pipe, I'm ready, man. I'll maybe have to move left and right, but I'm going to find my ground quick. Like, to me, that's where I'd like to be.
So what about, well, that goes maybe to have a good perspective too on life too.
Absolutely. Right. You know, when I say I'm not in the positive psychology camp, but I'm in the opportunistic camp, I think the capability gap we have is huge. Right. But I also know that things come down that I have to be ready for. But I think that makes me stronger. I'm not negative about it. I'm opportunistic. I think any issue is an opportunity to get better. Any struggle, if I could find my ground, get clarity, be conscious of my behavior, provides an opportunity. I like that way to think. I like that thinking.
Sports athletes, or they work a lot with coaches and all that. Can you relate a little bit, like the mental state that they have to be to, like, to perform, and for other people that may be like in entrepreneurship or any area of life?
Well, I coach pro athletes, C-suite executives, and traders and portfolio managers. So I coach them all. But the number one thing is mindset, right? I know there's 9,000 books on it, but it's the mindset that what you're capable of doing, right? It's the mindset that in tough times, I have the confidence to behave in a way that's I'm going to excel. You know, I have a saying, and it's not my saying. It's actually Billie Jean King wrote a book called Pressure is a Privilege, and you hear it all the time. But when you have pressure, that means somebody's giving you a responsibility, right? Whether it's a father, a husband, a CEO, or anybody in an organization, athlete, that means this is a responsibility. So pressure is a privilege. The question is, how do we use that pressure? Right? For some people, the pressure is too high. We have to understand where to get it to a level that maybe not comfortable, but enough to make a good decision. But that's for everybody. When athletes, they deal with the same sort of pressure. They have trauma growing up. They're human beings. We're all humans in this game. And I think as a coach, to understand that has to be a part of my system. Right? When you think of an athlete on a field, right? The pressure is significant, whether it's football, baseball, right? Everybody's looking at them. There's pressure, but also, they can revert to past experiences that'll mess up their performance. So it's my job and their job to understand what these past experiences were and to get ahead of it, right? I feel nervous. I'm being judged, whatever it may be, but these are real issues. So what's wrong with discussing it, getting it out so we can perform to the level that we know we're capable of? And that, listen, like for anybody, for athletes, C-suite executives, traders, I am assuming that they're doing the physical work, right? As for athletes and film and stuff like that. For executives, they're reading what they need to read. They're aware of what's going on in their organization. For Wall Street professionals, they're doing the prep. They're doing all those things necessary, right? I'm the mental guy. But don't think if you're not doing everything necessary that you're going to be successful. You're not. Having mental resilience leverages that. But the work's got to be put in. Do you agree with that? I can't hear you.
I said, of course. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Of course. So how does how does someone come back from failure, from a big failure? Sometimes, like mentally, it can be really devastating to make the comeback when you've been knocked down. How do you process that?
That's an incredible question. You know, for somebody when they go into a rut, we got to wind the film back to when it first started. To actually go back and put words to those feelings of what was going on. I was nervous. I was scared. I was embarrassed. Literally go back to the moment when it started. That alone, believe it or not, opens up the mind to possibilities, right? Because, you know, the mind is always predicting, and it predicts from past experiences. So when you're in a slump, whether you're losing money, business is going bad, athletes in a rut, you have to be able to go back and say, okay, man, when did this start? That's one. Number two also is to give yourself that space. Okay, what is going on right now? What am I thinking about? How am I feeling? And what do I need to do right now? So when I said earlier in this conversation, we have to find that ground, we have to go right to it. But you know, it's interesting, you know, I've worked with athletes who are just tremendous. I mean, accolades, what they've done, you'd be like, they feel that way? I go, yeah. You have to be able to remind them what they're capable of too sometimes, right? Because, you know, as the brain predicts from, you know, into the future, and it predicts are based on past experiences, oftentimes you have to remind somebody of what they've done, right? And that leads to another interesting thing when you talk about techniques. There's so much research out now that when we do something well, you have to give yourself a little bit of credit. And the research now neurologically is that, you know, as people, we're survival based, right? That's just evolution. But let's say we do something good. It's so important to give yourself a minute to sit with it viscerally, meaning internally, right? And feel it through your body. What happens when you do that neurologically, the pathways in your brain start to change. Like you've obviously heard, Richard, of neuroplasticity and how the brain changes. But actually, by sitting there and feeling what it feels like to be successful, feeling what it feels like to have a good day, you are literally rewiring your brain. So if the pendulum is like this to survival, we can never go to fully thriving. It just doesn't work that way. But doing that, we're able to move that pendulum more to the middle. And that's incredible. And why do I say this? So when you're in a rut and all this stuff like that, you're able to channel back to when you did good things. Right? It's important. This repetition of, and it goes back to being opportunistic. Okay, this sucks right now. I'm struggling. Give yourself a breath. Okay, what do I need to do here? But the whole thing is that when you think about it the whole time, it doesn't help. You have to verbalize it and say it. And then we just take steps to get out. And then we're back on, you know, and then you start building that intrinsic momentum and you're back to where you need to be. It's really fascinating.
When the odds seems to be against you, uh, what the how do you deal with that too? Also, in any area of life.
I mean, it's like the Holy Grail, right? You know, when you feel that the odds are stacked against you, right? And you know, it's like raise or fold, right? But you know it's time to raise, right? You know, sometimes you got to fold and say, you know, it's not working right now in business. And sometimes, you know, you have to know when to say this is not working, the bet didn't pay off, and I have to move on, right? Which is very difficult for people. You know, I'm a trader for 23 years, so I know how to lose. Right? I know, you know, I always tell my guys, let's lose properly. But I think in those situations, you really have to give yourself space to really recognize, and there's a common theme here, recognize what's going on internally. Okay, I'm scared. I'm doubtful. This is not going my way. What do I need to do now? And you literally have to sit down and weigh out your pros and cons. Okay, what is going right? What do I need to get better at? And what do I have to be realistic about here? But what happens though, Richard, is that the best place to make decisions is not panic. And it's really not euphoria either. You know, you could be nervous and still make great decisions. But you have to get yourself to a spot where when we make these decisions, when we're in this rut, it's not coming out of fight or flight, right? You have to be able to get yourself to a level where you can actually make conscious decisions. So when business is not going well, trading's not going well, we're in a slump, we're panicked. We're sheer panicked, right? Because then we start thinking catastrophe. We start going down these fractals of, well, if business doesn't get good, I'm going to lose my business. I'm going to lose, and my wife may leave me. I'm going to lose my house. My kids will never go to school. We can go down that road pretty quickly, right? So we have to be able to stop ourselves, consciously, okay, I'm freaking out right now. What do I need to do? Right? Because if we keep it in our head, that narrative builds. So when you're in a slump, the best thing you can do is discuss it and say it. Because if we try to fight that, the momentum just builds. The narrative keeps getting stronger. And it really keeps us back in the past, in survival mode again, as opposed to thriving.
Again, sorry about that. Where can people find you on social media or the internet?
I'm at, my website is m1performancegroup.com. And I actually, for all your listeners, I have a couple questions, a call to action. I have a webinar called the M1 Mental Model, and I have a discovery call. But we actually made a page for you guys. So it's m1performancegroup.com/better lifestyle. So if you do that, I think maybe you're going to put it in your notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be in your notes that you can get me right there. And I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram. I'm doing my best. Doing my best here. I'm trying to write good stuff. You know, I'm a numbers guy, so I'm struggling a little bit, but I'm truly enjoying it though.
It's all good. It was nice meeting you, Evan. I really enjoyed this conversation. And also nice to see your face too, because in the podcast when we were talking before, it was the audio. So
Exactly.
it was the audio. It was the audio version that I was listening to. So thank you everybody for taking the time to listen to the podcast. Welcome to A Better Lifestyle. My name is Richard Lesperance, and I go by the name of my man Richard. And I was with Evan Marks, and we'll see you on the next episode, everybody. Bye.
My man, Richard, I appreciate you having me, buddy.
And no problem. It was a pleasure to have you.
Terrific. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.